If I was Mike Nelson, I would be saying something like, "Oh, bejeezers." Right? Like, I don't know if you guys have ever listened to
Funny.
any of the things with Mike. It's pretty funny. So for
Yeah.
anybody that's like just tuning in, we decided to make a podcast out of this, but this is actually a coaching call with one of our clients, and she was talking about reversing out of performance focused fat loss. And if you're not familiar with what we do there, essentially we try to move people to maintenance. And so I was going to talk about a couple things, but Mary has actually brought up a couple interesting points in this conversation. So I was like, well, you know what? I think people would want to hear this. And so we decided to turn on the microphone and see how this turns out. So we'll see how that goes. Um, but what Mary's saying is that she actually weighs more now than she did when she first started off with performance focused fat loss. And she brought up one thing that was sort of interesting was that, I mean, do you remember how much you lost?
5 pounds.
Okay. And so as you were trying to reverse, do you remember what you started off at?
I started at 156
Okay.
at the beginning of PFFL.
Right.
I got down to 151.
Right.
And then at the end, I was closer to 153. I actually gained a couple pounds back the second month.
Yeah. So what I think is really super important, and I think that people are going to find this probably the most interesting thing that they've heard this week. like, like I mean, that's sort of like the evolution of eat to perform, right? Where, um, the stuff that we were saying 2, 3 years ago was like totally amazing to people. And then, as we've sort of evolved and we've been able to kind of answer more questions, there's a couple things, and some of it's anecdotal, and some of it's backed in very scientific data. But one, if you have a history of chronically dieting, what we see and what the science kind of supports is that the you ultimately will regress back to the norm quicker than someone that has been fit their whole life and ate an adequate amount of calories for what they do most of the time, right? So if you've been kind of in these boom and bust dieting cycles, I don't know if that is your case. What's your height, Mary?
5'7".
Okay. And so, for you, 5'7", 156, 160 is actually below average. The average, I don't know if you know this, was 5'4", 155 pounds, right? And
Right.
so, but we all are on some type of continuum as it relates to that. So one of the things that, as I walk you guys through this, one of the things that Mary said was that she actually felt and looked leaner a couple weeks in. And here's the reason why that's the case. What performance focused fat loss does is it sets you up where you are more insulin sensitive. And what insulin sensitivity means is that your body is more likely to store your, glycogen from glucose sources, right? So I'm just trying to break it down in like the most, simplistic way, as a description for a general audience, right? So when your body is actually in a period of deprivation, right, it's more prone to kind of reclaim nutrients as you start bringing more food into the thing. It starts processing better, and that's why your muscles look fuller, right? And that's why you looked leaner a few days in, even though your weight probably wouldn't have been vastly different, right?
It was probably exactly the same at that point.
Yeah, and and you didn't do any like body fat testing or anything like that at that point,
No. Mm-mm.
right? And so for someone that's already lean, um, and once again, I mean, we're not going to share this information if Mary doesn't want it shared. But do you have any, idea what your body fat percentage was?
Not really. Mm-mm.
Okay, so we're mostly just going off of kind of weight and things of that nature. I mean, just
Right.
you describing height, weight stats.
Hmm.
You sound like a relatively lean person already, right? I don't know if you view yourself that way. A lot of the times, a lot of the times people look at, um, the weight loss, what they weigh as kind of the determining factor on whether or not they're lean or not. And one of the things that we've been kind of harping on since the beginning of Eat to Perform is that muscle always matters. And so what you basically did was you made your body more sensitive, so you could retain more muscle and potentially build more muscle down the road, right?
Right.
So then you go, well, all right, um, what about maintenance, right? Why am I struggling with the weight that I was at? Well, one, you're going to naturally gain a little bit of weight. I mean, how many weeks has it been since you started reversing out of performance focused fat loss?
Probably about 12.
Okay. And so you're 12 weeks out of performance focused fat loss, or you're 4
It's got
weeks?
to be pretty close because I did July 15th through September 15th. And then I've been reversing out of it ever since then. We're getting close to the middle of December. So it's about 3 months.
Okay, I got you. That totally makes sense. Um, what I think is interesting about what you're describing, because if I said to you at 156, would you say when you're after performance focused fat loss, you've actually gained some weight, but the look is better 2-3 weeks in? Would you say that your body fat percentage was less? Probably, right?
I looked less than when I started. Yes. I
Yeah,
looked more muscular, less fluffy.
yeah,
I looked better. And it was about 2 weeks after I finished PFFL that where I thought I looked the best. So
yeah.
that's why I thought, oh, yay, expansion. This is great. I'm going to look great for the rest of my life. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
This is awesome.
So
I'm eating more and I'm feeling great. And I look good too. So I was really excited at that point.
so now let's use that number, okay, right? Because ultimately you lost 5 pounds, right? And
Right.
then at 156, let's just, as a for instance, say that you gained 5 pounds of muscle through some level of insulin sensitivity, through some level of actual earned tissue through training, right? So roughly, you're looking at 7.5 pounds, um, depending on kind of we're sort of estimating, but let's just go ahead and estimate 5 pounds. So you lost 5 pounds, you gained 5 pounds, but you look leaner. So we'll go ahead and say 5 pounds. That's roughly 3% body fat. Okay. What I think most people struggle with, when we're talking about these issues, is maintenance, right? So now you have more muscle, and so your body, basically the way that body fat cells work, is they don't go away. They're either filled or not filled, right? So
Right.
based on food consumption, you changed who you were, right? And you changed, how much muscle you had. And so if, we just said you were 26%, you went down to say 23%, we netted out better than we started off, right?
Right.
Then as you gained the muscle back, then you started eating in a way that reversed your calories out. Basically, what was going to happen at that point is you are either going to fill your body fat cells again, right? or you're going to have to really be diligent about how slowly you will go about that, right? So in this
Right.
instance, what you're saying is in 3 months, you have roughly netted out and then added some. I would say that your body fat percentage probably is either better or roughly the same as when you first started performance focused fat loss, but you probably added somewhere in the neighborhood of about 5 pounds of muscle in that process, which would be a good thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
What there's a few ways to sort of deal with this. One, I mean, I don't know if you saw my 2 week mini cut article. That's certainly going to be an option. One of the things that Mary mentioned, I don't know if we said this on the call yet, but
Mm-hmm.
the holidays, things of this nature, have sort of creeped up on her. I think what I don't think really anything changed very much from the standpoint of I think you gained muscle. I think you became more insulin sensitive. When we look at how someone recovers from dieting cycles, right? The most important factor isn't the dieting cycle. Most people find that fairly easy, right? I mean, you were probably looking to lose somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 to 10 pounds. That's the way we kind of structure it. You
Right.
lost 5 pounds. Probably says that one, your deficit wasn't deep enough. Maybe we didn't go down to like the lower number enough, as your, metabolism down regulated. So that could account for, why you lost 5 pounds instead of 8.
Mm-hmm.
When you start coming out though, you have to be really super wary. Like one of the things that I always say to people, and one of the advantages of kind of really having resolve, I think what happens with a lot of people is they start doing a performance focused fat loss cycle and they're like, I'm going to lose 8 to 10 pounds. And they lose like the initial water weight. And after that, they will try to exercise or whatever it is to get to where they want to go. But at the end of the day, in 8 weeks, you need to lose 8 pounds, right? Now, can you talk to me a little bit about what that looked like for you? Were there some struggles why you couldn't do it, or were you pretty much following like the top two numbers and then you didn't really view the third number as an option?
I never went to the third number.
Yeah.
That was like, when it was originally presented was like the last resort number, and try never to go there. And so I stuck with my training days and my rest days as the top two numbers.
Right.
And I never went to the low one.
So let me explain that part. Okay. So essentially, what we're trying to do is get you the most weight loss with the least amount of interference, right? And what that means is if we can get you to lose 8 pounds with those two numbers, then great. The problem is if you have, I don't know, do you have a history of dieting? Is this something that's kind of been a thing for your life?
Oh, my whole life.
Okay.
I can remember dieting in 8th grade.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
and that's common, right? I mean, I think most of the people that would listen to this could relate to that, right?
Right.
What I think happens, and I don't have to think it, this is actually scientifically supported, is that your body's going to down-regulate a little quicker than somebody who, hasn't been dieting very often. And so what's going to, you're probably going to have to look at that lower number. So you're saying, well, people were saying don't go to that lower number unless you absolutely positively have to. Well, if you've only lost 5 pounds and you're looking at 8 pounds, right, then you have to, right?
Okay.
So that's a little bit of what we learned here. But that's not the biggest factor because, honestly, the dieting, if I said to you, Mary, I need to lose 8 to 10 pounds, I don't care how you do it, you'd figure it out, right? That ain't people's biggest problem.
Yeah, I could do it, but it's not good.
Yeah, that's not people's biggest problem. People's biggest problem is the maintenance period.
Exactly.
Right? Mm-hmm. And so what happens with most people is they think of the maintenance period and they think, well, you know, I certainly don't want to gain all the weight back. Well, actually, let me start at the beginning. I think the way that the good majority of people diet, they diet and they go, okay, you know, I wanted to get to 145, but I'm under 150, so I'm going to stay at 150. And, you know, I had to eat 1,200 calories, so therefore I'm just going to eat 1,200 calories for the rest of my life, which ends up either being totally unrealistic or obsessive or a negative relationship with food, right?
Right.
What they don't realize is sort of what you know now, right? That when you make your body more insulin sensitive, you kind of coach your body into being more efficient as it relates to processing nutrients. That's favorable for muscle mass. That's why you look leaner. I think that would have showed up on a body fat test. It would have been interesting to see that, right? See the numbers, but we don't need to see it for you because we know it. We see it with Eat to Perform customers on a daily basis. What the good majority of people, when they diet, they're scared to death of raising their calories for the reason that you did, right? Or the reason that we're talking about right now, because your weight is slightly higher and you're like, oh my God, you know, I lost ground. You did not lose ground because in this process, you were able to gain some muscle. I would imagine that you're gaining some capacity. And my suspicion is that you've netted out to roughly the same. So there's two things. One, I think, you know, if you wanted to 2 week mini cut, you certainly could. If you wanted to 2 week mini cut around January, we certainly could. Those are all options. I think the other, and I actually like that option better than the option that I'm about to tell you. Okay. What you could have done is taken the reverse period out a lot longer. And I think at the end of the day, I don't think that you're going to see enough recovery there, right? I mean, in some ways, when you have a history of dieting and you've been dieting the majority of your life, your maintenance period and getting back to maintenance period has to be longer, right? That's just the math, you know. And when we were actually having this conversation with the Eat to Perform coach who was sort of struggling with this same issue, and I was like, look, honestly, I know you have a history of dieting, and basically your body just kind of went back to, well, I guess we're in preservation mode, right? But in your instance, you've really kind of netted out the same. Your body fat percentage is probably about the same, but you've gained, you know, let's say 5 pounds of muscle. If I said to you, you know, could you gain 4 pounds if you netted out 5 pounds of muscle? My suspicion is that you would say, no, will not do it. Don't want to do it, right? Um, I don't know. Would you? I mean, like, I'd be curious, you know, like, because obviously this is a very personal question for each person. But what are your thoughts when I say that?
I would like to gain muscle. I mean, I think I actually have. I've PR'd so many lifts since I went out of PFFL that I really think my muscle mass is a lot higher than it was before.
Well, that brings us to another point that's sort of separate to this maintenance issue. So I want to finish out the maintenance part. I'm going to shut down the recording after that because honestly, I think that, you know, we can talk about a lot of this stuff a long period of time, but in general, we sort of covered it. You have to take the reversing period maybe a little bit longer. And so, you know, when we would see that you were sort of having these issues. Frankly, though, I don't think that it's a big issue for you. I think, you know, if we took, you know, a short cycle where we get rid of, I think it's probably mostly water, you know, certainly, uh, you know, it could be some body fat. It's always some combination of the two. I think, you know, before I shut the recording down, I do want to say one thing that I think that needs to be said, you know, is that most people want to gain um, muscle and then lose fat at the same time.
Right.
You got to pick, you know.
Right.
And anybody telling you differently, I mean, if you've been training for about 2 weeks, you know, yeah, you can do it. But if you've been exercising for more than 6 months, you'd be much better off with sort of the approach that we're talking about with Mary here, where, you know, you're taking these short cycles, you're making your body more insulin sensitive. And I think what your body is saying is that, hey, I'm ready to thrive. I'm ready, I'm ready to do some good business here. I think that, if we were to see that your metabolism was repressed, we would see, kind of weight stabilization, things of this nature. I think in general, these are positive signs for your metabolism. I do think that, we probably want to get rid of some of the water. That might address a little bit of accumulated fat over the last, couple weeks. And that will just sort of dial things in for you. And then Sarah will sort of obviously get you that plan. So I'm going to end the recording there, and then we'll finish up the call and kind of wrap things up. So I appreciate everybody listening. I hope this was helpful. And if you have any questions, just let us know.